She said nothing, and that nothing was the loudest thing in the room. Not a raised voice, not an accusation, not a single word that could be addressed, defended against, or resolved through conversation. Just a quality of quiet that filled the space between you like smoke, pressurized, deliberate, impossible to ignore. And within minutes of that silence arriving, you were already inside it, replaying the last thing you said, searching for the offense, becoming smaller in proportion to how large the quiet was growing. She didn't need to say a word. She had already taken control of the entire dynamic without opening her mouth. This is the weapon most men spend years being wounded by without ever learning its name. Not because they are weak, because they are caring. Because the silence is engineered to activate precisely the things that make a caring man respond. His guilt, his empathy, his need for resolution, his inability to tolerate the sense that someone he loves is in pain because of him. The silence finds all of that. It finds it reliably, efficiently, without a single accusation to defend against. Picture a man standing in a kitchen. They were fine 10 minutes ago. Something shifted, he doesn't know exactly what or when. Now she's moving around the space without looking at him. Not hostile, not crying, just absent. Present and absent simultaneously. He asks if she's okay. She says she's fine. The way she says it communicates that she is not fine. He asks again. She says she doesn't want to talk about it. Now he is orbiting her silence, waiting for the signal that he has done enough to re-enter her warmth. He has been controlled without a hand being laid on him, without a word being said against him. He is managing a weapon he cannot see. This video will show you exactly how it works, why it works with such precision on men who care, and what the disarmament actually looks like, not as a strategy but as the recovery of something that was always yours. You know this experience too precisely to pretend you don't. The shift in atmosphere arrives without announcement. One moment the dynamic is functional, ordinary, even warm. Then something changes and you feel it before you can locate it. She becomes quieter. The quality of her presence shifts. The warmth you had been operating with is no longer available, and no explanation has been attached to its removal. You did what any man who cares does. You tried to close the gap. You asked questions. You offered understanding. You reviewed your recent behavior with the diligence of a man who takes responsibility seriously. You became warmer, more attentive, more careful, because the silence communicated distress, and your instinct toward her distress was to move toward it, to solve it, to restore what was there before. And nothing you did was enough. The silence continued. Sometimes it deepened. The more you reached toward it, the more it seemed to have weight, texture, intention. You began doubting yourself. Not dramatically, a low-grade uncertainty that sits in your chest and makes clear thinking difficult. Did I say something wrong? Did I miss something? Is this about something I'm not aware of? The self-review became continuous. And the continuous self-review, without any clear object to examine, produced the most exhausting possible state. Guilt without evidence, anxiety without cause. A man sits across from a woman who has not made eye contact in 40 minutes. The dinner he made is on the table. He tries conversation, something light, something that has nothing to do with whatever is happening. She answers briefly, returns to her phone. He sits in the silence and tries to calculate what move will break it. He is eating dinner across from someone who has effectively left the room without physically leaving. He is being managed through absence. And the management is working precisely because he cares. The brutal contrast. A man who did not care would not feel the silence as pressure. He would sit in it without restructuring his entire internal state around its resolution. The silence works because his caring is real, and the caring is what the silence reached inside and activated. Understanding the mechanism beneath this, the specific psychology operating in both directions, is where this changes. The mechanism has two layers and both need to be named. The first is emotional leverage through ambiguity. Silence, as a relational tool, works because it creates a problem without defining it. A direct accusation can be addressed. A stated grievance can be examined, contested, resolved. An argument has a shape that a man's rational faculties can engage with. Silence has none of these qualities. It presents a problem without content, a wound without a description. And the human mind, confronted with a problem it cannot define, fills the definition vacuum with whatever internal material is most readily available. For a man who cares, that material is guilt, self-doubt, and the fear that he has somehow failed the person he loves. He does not need to have done anything wrong. The silence alone creates the conditions under which he begins behaving as if he has. He apologizes for an offense that was never named. He adjusts for a failure that was never specified. He confesses to nothing in particular and calls it taking responsibility. The second layer is power through discomfort tolerance. Whoever is most comfortable sitting in the silence holds the power in the dynamic. She has created the condition. She is managing her own relationship to it. He is trying to resolve it. That asymmetry, her ownership of the silence, his desperation to end it, is the entire power structure in miniature. Contrast two men receiving the same silence. The first man feels the discomfort and immediately moves toward resolution. Questions warmth, recalibration of behavior. The second man feels the same discomfort, acknowledges the silence without requiring it to end, and returns to himself. He continues doing what he was doing. He is present. He is not hunting for the key that unlocks her. She feels both responses with absolute precision. Picture the second man reading in a chair while she is quiet on the other side of the room. He is not performing indifference. He is genuinely stable enough to let the silence exist without making it his emergency to resolve. She notices, after 20 minutes, that the pressure of the silence is entirely on her side now. He has not absorbed it. When a man can sit in her silence without flinching, the silence stops being a weapon. It becomes a question, and he is no longer the one answering it. What this looks like in the specific texture of real relationship moments, and how the power transfers the moment a man stops running toward the quiet, is what makes this section unavoidable. The deployment varies. The effect is always the same. The most common version arrives after a minor friction, something that, under normal conditions, would have been resolved in 10 minutes. Instead of addressing it directly, she goes quiet. The quietness is total enough to be felt, partial enough to be deniable. If he names it, "You seem angry," she responds, "I'm fine." The fine lands like a door closing. He is now managing a conflict that has no face. He cannot address what hasn't been stated. He cannot resolve what hasn't been named. So he orbits. He tries softer conversation, gentle check-ins, small acts of warmth directed toward the cold. Each one goes slightly unreceived. Each unreceived act of warmth costs him something, a further dose of uncertainty, a further reduction in his confidence that he is reading the situation correctly. He is, in the truest sense, being controlled, not through what she is doing, but through what she is not doing. The absence of her engagement has more force than any argument she could have made. It shows up in the unanswered message, the text he sends that she reads and doesn't respond to for 6 hours. He sees the read receipt. He knows she saw it. He begins composing the follow-up, then doesn't send it, then does, then regrets the sending because it made his waiting visible. All of this internal activity, this expenditure of cognitive and emotional energy, produced by nothing, by the absence of a reply, the reframe that changes the entire picture. She did not take the power from him. He handed it to her, in both hands, the moment he decided that her silence was his problem to solve. That decision, unconscious, instant, automatic in men who care, is the entire mechanism. The moment he assigned himself responsibility for resolving her quiet, the power transferred completely. Now picture a different man in the same room. He sends the message. He gets the read receipt. He puts his phone down and goes back to what he was doing. An hour later, he's genuinely deep in something else. She texts 2 hours after that, something that opens more than the earlier message would have. He did not win a game. He simply refused to make her silence the governing condition of his afternoon. And that refusal, quiet, unstated, grounded, communicated something she felt before she consciously registered it. The deeper truth operating beneath all of this is where this becomes impossible to look away from. Here is the truth at the base of the entire structure, and it requires a man to look at himself clearly to receive it. The silence works because of something that is already present inside the man it reaches, a specific vulnerability that the silence doesn't create but finds. The vulnerability is this: his peace of mind is stored, in significant part, inside her approval of him. Her warmth is not something he appreciates. It is something his internal stability requires. And the moment it is removed, even temporarily, he experiences something close to destabilization. Not because the silence is so powerful, because his internal ground is insufficient to hold him when she withdraws from it. This is the truth that is harder to receive than anything else in this video. The silence is not her weapon. It is the echo of your own dependency, amplified. She did not make him dependent on her emotional temperature. That dependency was already there. The silence revealed it. And the revealing is useful, not comfortable but useful, because a man who does not know where his stability is stored cannot begin to move it. Here is the line that will generate real debate, but holds. A woman who uses silence as consistent relational leverage is not necessarily calculating or malicious. Often she learned, without ever consciously planning it, that going quiet produced the kind of attention and movement from him that direct communication never did. The silence worked. So the silence continued. The dynamic trained her as much as it trained him, and neither of them is fully aware of what they are inside. Picture a woman who has been quiet for 2 days. She is not sure, if asked directly, what she wants from the silence. Part of her genuinely needs space. Part of her is waiting for a specific quality of reaching from him, something that demonstrates that her withdrawal cost him something. She is not running a calculated operation. She is responding to feelings through a pattern that has worked before. He is not dealing with a strategist. He is dealing with a dynamic. And the dynamic feeds on his response. The weapon is not silence. The weapon is his need for it to end. That need, the inability to hold himself steady inside her quiet, is the only thing the dynamic actually requires to function. Remove the need, and the silence becomes information rather than pressure. A signal he can read calmly rather than a void he rushes to fill. Building that removal is not about becoming indifferent. It is about relocating his peace of mind to a place she cannot reach with her withdrawal. What that relocation looks like in practice and how radically it changes the dynamic is the beginning of the shift. The shift is interior before it is behavioral. That sequence is not optional. A man cannot convincingly sit in her silence if sitting in it requires constant effort. The moment it requires effort, the moment he is white-knuckling his composure while she is quiet, she feels the effort. The performed stillness is louder than the reaching it was supposed to replace. She knows the difference between a man who is settled and a man who is managing himself into the appearance of settledness. The interior shift is this: he stops housing his peace of mind inside her emotional temperature. He does not do this through discipline applied in the moment. He does it through the prior construction of an interior that is genuinely full enough that her warmth is something he values, but not something he requires to feel stable. A man with that interior moves through her silence differently. He is not comfortable with it in the sense of enjoying it. He is comfortable with it in the sense of being able to hold himself inside it without destabilizing. He can acknowledge that something is wrong without making it his emergency to resolve. He can remain present without orbiting the quiet for a way through it. The man who can sit in her silence without flinching is the man she will eventually break it for. Contrast this clearly. The man who reaches into every silence teaches her that the silence is productive, that it generates the movement and attention she wanted. The man who holds himself steady inside the silence teaches her something different, that the silence costs her more than it costs him, that the tool produces diminishing returns when the target is no longer compelled to run toward it. If this is reaching something specific in you, if you can feel the particular shape of a silence you've been running toward for months or years, stay in that recognition. Because what follows is the warning that most men understand too late. The warning is not about her. It is about what a man becomes when he makes the wrong adjustment. Some men hear this video and decide to match the silence, to outquiet the quiet, to construct a countersilence designed to outlast hers and demonstrate that he is no longer vulnerable to the weapon. That adjustment is as much of a failure as the original chasing, because it is still organized around her, still reactive, still measuring himself against her emotional output, just from the opposite direction. A man who matches her silence to beat her at the game is still inside the game. He just changed which piece he's playing. The lesson is not about silence as a counter-tactic. It is about silence as a condition of genuine stability. When a man is truly settled inside himself, he does not meet her silence with strategic silence. He meets it with the natural, unremarkable quiet of a person who has somewhere else to be in his own interior. No drama attached to either direction. Picture a man who finally stopped running toward the silence. She went quiet on a Tuesday, the familiar kind, the kind that used to cost him a full evening. He acknowledged it briefly once without urgency. Then he made dinner, watched something he'd been meaning to watch, did an hour of work he'd been postponing, went to bed at a normal time. She spoke on Wednesday morning, not with resolution or apology, just back, as if the silence had finished on its own timeline without his assistance. He did not win. He did not perform. He simply held himself. And the holding, sustained not through gritted effort but through genuine inner sufficiency, changed the texture of every silence that followed. Because she learned, gradually and without announcement, that silence no longer guaranteed movement from him, that the lever had been removed not by resistance, but by the simple, structural reality of a man who no longer needed her warmth to maintain his ground. What becomes possible for that man, inside that relationship and beyond it, is the final section. This is the full picture assembled clearly. The silence was never about you. It was about what she discovered she could reach inside you with nothing but its presence. Your guilt, your anxiety, your need for resolution, your inability to hold yourself steady when her warmth was withdrawn. She may have discovered this consciously or not. The dynamic required only one thing: a man whose peace of mind was stored in her approval. When that storage location changes, when a man builds an interior that does not collapse when she goes quiet, the entire weapon loses its edge. Not because she changes, because the target changes. And a weapon without a target is just silence. Silence is only a weapon against the man who cannot bear to be inside it. That inability, to sit in her quiet without reaching, without managing, without filling the void with apology and adjustment, is not a character flaw. It is a condition that can be corrected. But the correction happens before the silence arrives, not inside it. It is built in the ordinary hours when she is not withdrawn, through purpose, through discipline, through the daily practice of being a man whose sense of worth does not live in another person's emotional output. That man is not cold. He is not indifferent. He is genuinely present when he is present, and genuinely stable when she is not. He can love fully without the loving requiring her continuous confirmation to remain intact. If this channel has been giving you language for things you've felt but couldn't name, subscribe. This is what this channel is built for, and there is more precision coming. If you know a man who is currently inside the silence cycle, reading receipts, orbiting her quiet, composing messages he isn't sure he should send, share this with him. It may be the clearest mirror he's encountered. Leave a comment with this: what did her silence cost you that her words never could? And when did you first realize the silence was the point? Because that realization, quiet, specific, arrived at in the dark, is where every man eventually finds the beginning of this shift. The only way to disarm her silence is to stop being the man who cannot survive it.